Do you ever notice that when someone makes kind of, a video on YouTube that stands up to the racists, that it's just, covered with trolls, it's covered with dislikes, and that, do you ever wonder just why that is? I don't think I'm alone in recognizing it. I mean, I've talked to other people about this, but they don't seem to quite notice it. But I think it's very, very obvious and very, very prevalent that there just are a lot of racists, a lot of anti-Semites, xenophobes, and a lot of alt-right behavior going on YouTube. And the alt-right thing is something that isn't really hidden too closely. But what I would say is, we right now have something that's going on like the IDW, the Intellectual Dark Web, which, comprises a variety of guys. You know who they are, so we don't have to go through them step by step. And yes, it does include Sam Harris, because anytime anyone brings up the IDW and Sam Harris are like, he's not the same as the others. Okay, he can be in the IDW. I don't really see why not. But what we sort of have to recognize is, how do we get to this point when anybody who challenges things like racism are just, torn apart by trolls in the comment section? Why would you ever want to insult somebody for challenging racism? I mean, what really is the ambition going on there? But the thing is, though, where do these feelings come from? Well, it's just, there really is just an enormous amount of division amongst humanity. And, it's like, I was just, tuning in to Jesse Lee Peterson today, who is, somewhat of a far-right guy, but he hosts a satirical show called The Fallen State. It's kind of like satire or something, but he just asked the question, has humanity fallen? And the real response to that is, humanity is not a fallen state, because we were never built up to begin with. We were only like 2 steps away from being chimpanzees or something like that. And that's all of us. So anytime, there's a sort of major change in the world, it scares the fuck out of people, especially when it involves sexuality, especially when it involves, men trying to date women who are not from any sort of, traditional background that anybody anticipated. And it's why boys get high fives for trying to hook up with girls, and girls are referred to as sluts. Well, that's just the same thing. We're animals. We are 2 steps away from chimpanzees. They're happy when the males are trying to spread their seed and expand the progeny, or whatever you would want to call it, and they're really mad when females are, interacting with someone that they didn't anticipate. And that's just viewed as an invader, an outsider, a parasite, or also just someone who is not welcome. And this sort of racist mentality is really becoming ingrained in 21st century culture. I mean, first of all, it never went away, but what happened during the 90s, late 90s, early new millennium, is the racist mentality was really kind of hiding for a while. It was sort of dying off, and then what happened? 2006 we had YouTube, and there was just an explosion of an area where people could just say whatever they wanted. 2008 we had the first black president, really a biracial president, which everyone seemed to forgot about, that Obama was half white to begin with. But then, these two things combined together, and it energized the racists, and they had this platform which they could voice themselves on very easily. So that's just what led to the destructive elements that we now have in 2018, the time of this recording. But why did I bring up the IDW? Are these guys racists? No, but they're guys who really sort of say things that a lot of racists would want to hear. They say things that a lot of xenophobes would want to hear, because their agenda is not racist immediately, but it suits the racist. It suits them. It benefits them. They benefit from having guys like Ben Shapiro, and they benefit from guys even like Jordan Peterson when he talks about, some things like being anti-diversity and stuff. All of those people who are anti-diversity really benefit the racists. They just don't know it. I mean, diversity is an amazing thing, and it's like, the point is, we don't have to discriminate, but just when people from different backgrounds work together, no one can conform to their own cultural stereotype, so we have to communicate, and then we actually kind of come up with something better than what we had before. Diversity is amazing, Otherwise, it just kind of gets, stale, and it just kind of gets, like, kind of useless, to be honest, which is what a lot of people want, because they just benefit from the status quo. They benefit from how things are, and they don't want to recognize. It's just finding a way to weasel out of, interacting with part of the world that's moving in on you, whether you want to accept it or not. I mean, what's all this stuff about being opposed to immigration? Richard Spencer and all that saying they're even opposed to legal immigration. I mean, it's just utter nonsense. The fact of the matter is, those things all exist. And you're just saying, no, I don't wanna. Well, it's just not going to work. But how do we get to this level of, racism? Well, what happens is, a lot of people know how to manipulate this kind of racist dynamic. A lot of people know that there are racists in the world. They like to watch videos. They like to watch videos for hours upon end. Moreover, the people who are making videos that are catered to racists know that they're going to be available to even people who are not racist. If you're listening to this recording, there's a high chance that you are not a racist, that you don't actually have deep prejudice and hatred in your heart, plus the power to act upon that. But it's like, they know that that's just stuff that people want to hear, because it's like, it's, just something that is very, very easy to listen to. It's the concept of being a shock jock. People don't say that term too often. But what happens is, the people who want to listen to it agree with it, and then the people who don't like that content will listen even longer, because they just want to know what they're going to say next, especially when it's combined with some things like debate. Like, I started listening to a little bit more of David Pakman. I don't personally like him, actually. I didn't really know much about him until recently, and I started listening to a few more of his videos. But the thing is, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the statements that he's making, and he's even openly said that he would debate anyone. He agrees with the free speech thing about how you're supposed to just engage in debate with anyone, and he'll engage in debate with anyone to expose them if he disagrees with their platform. Well, the sort of problem with that is, you have to know, is someone being truthful? Is someone just making up crap so that they can try and win an argument and cater to a racist audience? Is the person being genuine with what they're saying? I mean, first you need to ask and answer those three questions. And also, it's like, forgive me if I don't see too much of a benefit in debating someone from the Ku Klux Klan or the neo-Nazis. What it's more like is, those people have plenty of exposure already. And when people make documentaries about the Ku Klux Klan or the neo-Nazis, or even about racism in general, it's not to try and understand their point of view. You already understand it. They don't like people who are different than them. It's easy to understand. It's not to give them a platform to argue. No, it's to treat them like a piñata when you're like, hey, look at this big dorky thing that's really weird. Let's beat it with a stick and see what falls out of it. That's why we have documentaries about the Klan and the neo-Nazis and the Aryan Brotherhood and so on. They're treated like piñatas. So, just like, what really is the benefit of debating someone whom is not trying to compromise on anything, that is not trying to understand your point of view, that is not trying to do anything other than use you as a platform to espouse their own ridiculousness? Now, I would never say that you shouldn't debate conservatives, you shouldn't debate Republicans, you shouldn't even debate right-wingers. You should debate all of those people, because not all conservatives are racist, not all right-wingers are racist, not all Republicans are racist. Yes, those are the people we need to be debating, the conservatives, the Republicans, and the right-wingers who do not have, some extremely destructive ideology like the Klan, neo-Nazis. You'll know destruction when you see it. But one of the things, though, like, Steven Crowder was even asking about this on one of his Change My Mind videos, when he's like, why do so many people, not want to debate him? Why don't progressives want to debate Steven Crowder? Well, the secular talk guy, Kyle Kulinski, addressed it years ago, I think. I think it was years ago when he made his response to that. He anticipated it. One fan asked him that, why won't you debate Crowder? And he's like, I'm not debating someone that I'm not convinced is real. And that's the biggest thing, though, is because those guys, the IDW, as well as people like Crowder and Joe Rogan and maybe some others, they know how to manipulate that kind of negative energy. They know how to say things that are going to use that negative energy to turn into viewership for them. And they use very choice wordings. Jordan Peterson said it as well in his Kathy Newman debate when he's like, I'm very careful with my words. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that was my absolute first impression of Jordan Peterson. He's being careful with his words to sort of just manipulate the YouTube audiences into watching him. And the way he does that is by manipulating that destructive, hateful energy. A lot of people that watch Jordan Peterson are racist. A lot of people that watch and listen to anything from the IDW are racist, and they're looking for things that can reaffirm their prejudice, that can confirm their bias. And it's like, we all know that these things are real. I don't really know why people are really trying to say, some things, that these people are not catering to a racist audience. And, racism is not just white supremacy. No, it is not. I mean, absolutely not. Racism and white supremacy aren't the same thing at all. So, it's like, because white supremacists, they're also anti-Jewish. I mean, if you're going to look at things like the Klan or the neo-Nazis that we were talking about, they're completely opposed to guys like Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin and Milo Yiannopoulos because they're Jewish. So it's like, not to mention that Milo and Dave Rubin are also gay, which are contrary to things that many of the Klansmen hold, many of the beliefs that the Klans hold and the probably the Nazis hold as well. So it's like, I mean, those are just things that just seem so obvious. But the real concept of free speech has been kind of grossly manipulated. I mean, I remember Lauren Southern was saying on the internet that free speech protects your right to be racist. Don't pretend that it doesn't. And yes, she did say that freedom of speech protects your right to be racist. I mean, the problem is, though, it's just that is so painfully not true. I mean, you can't use freedom of speech or free speech, whatever you'd want to call it, the First Amendment, open discussions. You can't use any of that stuff if you're ever going to be active with your racism. That's not protected by law. You're not allowed to tell someone, get out of my store, you're black. Or even for the other examples that we're dealing with, in 2018 in the 21st century, when someone says, you're not allowed to come into this apartment building, you're black. I mean, like, those things are not protected because we have things like the 1964 Civil Rights Act that, prevent you from doing that in public accommodations. And especially not if you actually do live there and you're saying you can't come into your own apartment building or whatever it was. I mean, that's a true story that just happened recently. That's also, your private domicile, private property laws. Free speech does not protect things like that. And especially not when you're trying to get active with something and get someone to leave public property because of their race. That stuff has been dealt with the Supreme Court, and it is not protected under the law. So people like Lauren Southern grossly misrepresent that, and it doesn't go without saying, because people are really trying to use all these things they're trying to use the mask of free speech to justify saying a bunch of nonsensical racist babble, to be honest, and it's it's working. They're generating a huge audience. Like, they're really able to connect with, countless individuals. Because for starters, some people actually like to hear that stuff. And on the other hand, once again, people just want to know what the racist or the IDW is going to say. And I don't think the people in the IDW are racist themselves. They're just being used as the gateway drugs into the alt-right, into the spheres of xenophobia, especially Islamophobia, which is going on now. And it's like, it's like those things are all being used by these people in the IDW, whether it is Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin and Ben Shapiro. All of those guys, are just kind of using the mask of free speech to try and manipulate this hateful energy that is within their viewers. But, one of the big things is, why is there so much hate in the YouTube communities? How did they get to this such racist level? Because I mentioned I was watching those Jesse Lee Peterson videos on the fallen state, and it's like, I mean, they're just looking for excuses to say insults about black people that are so radically to the contrary. Furthermore, they aren't even listening to the debates. Like, do you ever watch a video on YouTube where, it's like you hear a feminist debating somebody from the IDW, and you actually like, well, that was kind of a balanced discussion. And then in the comments section, everyone's tearing the feminist apart, just saying that she's a bad person, she's not smart, she shouldn't be out of the kitchen and stuff like that. No one's really listening to any sort of kind of conversation. And yeah, there are examples of like the Kathy Newman debate that we talked about, where Kathy Newman and Jordan Peterson, and Kathy Newman just completely failed. There are things like that. I don't deny it that, sometimes criticisms of a feminist are genuine. But one of the big things, though, if you're going to look at things like Gamergate, for example, like Anita Sarkeesian, most of what she says is true. When she's sort of saying, things like, yeah, they show women's butts in video games and they don't often show a man's butt or something. But, her on the other end, like, what she doesn't understand is that, a lot of women actually do wear form-fitting clothes, whereas a lot of men do not. And, it's like when men are out, doing things like war, combat, they aren't necessarily wearing form-fitting clothes that show off their butt. And it's like, this is just kind of how people dress. More importantly, what's so wrong about saying, yeah, alright, guys want to look at her because she's hot? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And why aren't they why aren't they overly sexualizing the male characters? Because they don't have to. The real thing that people should say with something like that is, you should just kind of make your own video game that overly sexualizes male characters. Let's see how your female audience does once you see, some dude walking around with, like, his penis hanging out. I mean, how is that going to work out for you? So, I mean, sometimes, these things can go too far. Sometimes feminism can go too far. But whether it's racism or Anita Sarkeesian, she told the truth. She just only told you a very small fragment of the truth. The same way that racists only tell you the truth, but only a small fragment of the truth. You ever heard of the terms like cherry-picking the data, distorting the information, slanting your side to get a desired outcome? This is done by so many people. But the thing is, when it comes to racism on YouTube, those people know how to slant the information to get this predicted outcome from their viewers, their readers, whatever you'd want to call them. And we saw this very large anti-blacks kind of sentiment building up in the kind of Obama era. It's always been there. I mean, all of the dynamics in American politics have really been there for a long time. Even back to the 1700s, we had, the small government versus big government debate. We had liberals and conservatives going at it all through the 1790s and all through the 1800s. I mean, like, Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun are all about those very same principles. So it's like, this stuff just never went away and it never changes. And it's just this constant cycle of, ridiculous divisions within human society. Once again, diversity makes us stronger. Working with people from different backgrounds makes us stronger. Interacting with people from different cultures and actually being able to bridge a sort of understanding makes us stronger. And saying things to the contrary make us weak. Saying things to the contrary make us, flawed, unnecessarily disadvantaged, because we would be much better off if all of humanity could unite together and we could achieve a qualitative outcome. But the thing is, though, like, a lot of people just have, this very deep, sense of hatred in their hearts. And the only way to get that to go away is, well, for starters, I mean, everyone should try having sex with a woman of a different race. And then maybe let's see if that doesn't change your perspective. And the second thing to do would be improve the economic situation for everybody in America. The way you do that, firstly, is you need to reinstate Glass-Steagall so that we don't have the mega banks ripping us off. And then you can, deal with the Federal Reserve in whichever way you see fit. We have people saying, end the Fed, nationalize the Fed, have the Fed be controlled by the Treasury Department. We need to deal with the Federal Reserve and get rid of private bankers printing the public money. How you go about that is going to be somewhat arguable. Let's improve the economic conditions of all of America, from Florida to Alaska to Hawaii and the territories, everyone, and just create a more perfect union for the entirety of the population. Then people are going to care a little bit less about these things such as racism. And then, once you have this improvement in economic development, you ever heard of these things called good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods? Well, we're going to have a lot more just normal neighborhoods. There's not going to be a good and bad. There's just going to be a normal neighborhood if we improve the overall economic quality of life for everybody in America. Then we're going to cut down on these things like Black Lives Matter and make them less necessary. I don't want to hear the Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter debate, because somebody like me is just like, yes, 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 all of these things. Yes, of course, Blue Lives Matter. I mean, the cops, who are protecting us and doing their jobs well and actually being honorable, yes, their lives matter so much. Do black people matter? Yes, of course they do. And do all other people matter? Yes, all of those people are human beings who deserve, to live in safety in America. And the only way to achieve that goal is, once again, to just kind of improve the quality of life for everybody, so we can make movements like Black Lives Matter less necessary. And once again, once we, target the mega banks, and then we can deal with the Federal Reserve, things like Occupy Wall Street would become unnecessary as well, and we wouldn't have an uprising of that nature. And just to get rid of this silly notion of liberal versus conservative, totally unnecessary. They've been arguing in circles like that since the 1790s, since we had, in America, people have been going back and forth over liberals versus conservatives, and it's just, it's going in circles to just keep yourself occupied. It feels like what we need to do is just recognize one people, one humanity, one nation, and then we can get rid of these silly, nonsensical YouTubers who are just trying to play off the ingrained prejudices that have been instilled in people from our human evolution, from these, animal primates that people are still trying to symbolize. It's like we're not chimpanzees anymore. When someone invades our territory, we don't have to tear them to shreds. When an outsider comes in, we don't have to look at them with fear like they're going to steal our women. What we should do is just, recognize that humanity is evolving, and then we can actually achieve, a more perfect union on the planet Earth. Well, that's all for me now. Until next time.